You are calling, inviting professionals for this discussion here, for a very, very candid interaction, I would say. This will definitely benefit our viewers, and they can actually view from the interactions that we are having here and sharing our experiences.
This week on Tech It Out, we show you the latest lineup of Chinese low-altitude aircraft. Find out how AI is changing the way we worship, and take a look at the future of wheelchairs. All this and more on WION World is One at these times.
Good evening, America. You are watching World DNA with me, Raisha Sehgal. On the show today, in a major relief for US President-elect Donald Trump, a New York judge has delayed Trump's hush money case sentencing indefinitely. We'll get you that report and a lot more on the show. But first, a quick check on the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin vows to launch more strikes using experimental intermediate-range ballistic missiles as Ukraine appeals for updated air defense systems to meet the new threat. US President-elect Donald Trump names prominent investor Scott Bessent as his pick for Treasury Secretary. Lori Chavez-Dermer picked for Labor Secretary. US President-elect Donald Trump's team hails decisive legal win after judge in Trump's criminal hush money case delays his sentencing indefinitely. Village set to fire in Pakistan's Lower Kurram district in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa a day after 42 people were killed in sectarian violence. Counting of votes to begin shortly for assembly elections in India's Maharashtra and Jharkhand. And our top focus on WION right now, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Russia would keep testing the hypersonic or Shenik missile as well as begin serial manufacturing of the experimental weapon. It is the same missile that Russia fired at Ukraine a day earlier. In a televised address, Putin said that there was no countermeasure to such a missile, which he said flies at 10 times the speed of sound.
По анализу данных оперативного и объективного контроля испытания прошли успешно. Я вас с этим поздравляю. И, как уже было сказано, мы будем эти испытания продолжать, в том числе и в боевых условиях, в зависимости от ситуации и характера угроз безопасности, которые создаются для России. Тем более, что запас таких изделий, запас таких систем, готовых к их применению, у нас имеется.
The new intermediate range missiles was fired at Ukraine in response to Kiev's use this week of American and British missiles, which are capable of striking deeper into Russia. It hit Pevdenmarsh plant that built ICBMs when Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. The introduction of the new weapon into the battlefield has further raised tensions in the nearly 3-year-old long war between Russia and Ukraine. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia's use of oceanic missiles scared the Ukrainian president.
Зеленский испугался, прям стал обвинять своих хозяев в том, что они его оставляют безоружным перед лицом такой вот акции со стороны Российской Федерации. Ну, наверное, это полезный результат, потому что уж чего-чего, а хотя бы быть поближе к реальности, ощущать ее на своей шкуре, я бы сказал, это уже полезно.
Meanwhile, following the strike, Zelensky urged the world leaders to make his Russian counterpart really afraid of expanding the war. In his nightly address, Zelensky highlighted that Ukraine's Minister of Defense is holding meetings regarding the supply of the new air defense systems to the country.
Коли хтось починає використовувати інші країни, вже навіть не тільки для терору, але й для випробування своїх нових ракет через терор, то це точно міжнародний злочин. І від Росії це знущання над позицією таких держав, як Китай, держав глобального півдня, деяких лідерів, які щоразу закликають до стриманості, а у відповідь отримують від Москви незмінно якусь нову ескалацію. Тому світ повинен звучати серйозно у відповідь, так, щоб Путін дійсно боявся розширювати війну та відчував реальні наслідки своїх вчинків.
Meanwhile, Moscow-backed head of Ukraine's Donetsk region, Denis Pushlin, posted a video said to show him visiting the captured Ukrainian village of Kharkivka. It is close to the industrial town of Kharkov. Russia says it took control of the village on November 3rd, 2024. Kiev confirmed the same, adding that the Russian forces were advancing by up to 300 meters per day on the eastern front. A source in the Ukrainian military cited in reports said that the situation in Kharkov was worse than that in Prokofsk, also a key prize for Russia. Now, the arrest warrant issued against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by the International Criminal Court has divided the world. Nations are divided over how to respond to the arrest warrants, the first ever issued by ICC against a leader of a democratic country. The warrant that was also issued for former Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and Hamas military chief Mohammad Deif drew a diplomatic dividing line between countries who vowed to abide by ICC's decision and those who pledged to defy it. While Netanyahu faces accusations of war crimes and crimes against humanity, he is unlikely to be handcuffed anytime soon as long as he avoids the countries that are a part of the ICC that are legally bound to enforce its arrest warrants. Now, this comes under the Rome Statute, the treaty established by the ICC. This includes 124 countries across 6 continents. That means that Netanyahu cannot travel to countries that recognize ICC. There are 33 countries in Africa that recognize the Criminal Court in Hague, 20 countries in Asia Pacific. They are also party to the ICC, 42 countries from Europe, and 29 countries in Americas that recognize the ICC. However, allies of Israel have strongly called out the arrest warrants. US President Joe Biden called the ICC arrest warrant against Israeli leaders as outrageous. He said, and I quote, "Let me be very clear once again, whatever the ICC might imply, there is no comparison, none, between Israel and Hamas. We will always stand with Israel against threats to its security." Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán promised not to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He sent a letter condemning the decision and also invited Netanyahu for an official visit on which he promised to ensure Netanyahu's safety and freedom is maintained. Meanwhile, Argentina's Prime Minister Javier Milei, an outspoken Netanyahu ally, described the warrants as an act that distorts the spirit of international justice. And shifting our focus to Pakistan, a deadly wave of sectarian violence has once again engulfed the country. And we're talking about Pakistan's troubled northwest, where the violence took place. A village was set to fire in Kurram district on Friday, where at least 42 people were killed a day earlier. The Bagan market, located in Lower Kurram district in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, was set on fire. Heavily armed men were seen setting fire to the village. Earlier, at least 42 people, including women and children, were killed after gunmen opened fire on Shia pilgrims there. The attack is being called one of the deadliest in recent years. Sectarian violence has escalated since July in Kurram between Shia and Sunni tribes over land disputes, claiming dozens of lives. According to senior police officials, the attacks took place when the convoy were on their way from the district headquarters of Parachinar to Peshawar. Thousands took to the streets in various cities of Pakistan on Friday against the incident. According to reports, demonstrations were held in Parachinar, the main town of Kurram district, as well as Karachi and Lahore. Funeral prayers for the people who lost their lives were held on Friday, with grief-stricken families mourning the loss of loved ones.
He had no sin. He was a very innocent and a noble man. He was only 40 years old and left behind small kids who have no support after his death. He himself was an orphan. His parents had also died. He had passed his 10th class and was working to feed his children. He never quarreled with anyone, was a very polite person, always focused on his own work. Now we are worried about his family and what we can do for them.
No group has claimed responsibility for the attack. The incident comes just a week after a highway in the area was reopened following the deadly clashes between Sunni and Shiite groups. Markets are closed in Parachinar as the community grapples with the aftermath of this horrific attack. Donald Trump has won a major legal victory. A judge in his criminal hush money case has ordered sentencing to be delayed indefinitely as the president-elect prepares for his White House return. Trump was found guilty on 34 felony fraud counts in May. He was supposed to be sentenced on 26th of November. That's less than 2 months before his presidential inauguration. But his lawyers have argued that his conviction should be tossed on the grounds of presidential immunity, saying that sentencing would interfere with his duties as the next U.S. president. His legal team cited a landmark July ruling from the Supreme Court that gives presidents sweeping immunity for official acts committed while in office. Justice Juan Merchan then paused all proceedings until he receives further arguments from both the parties in December. Trump's team has been granted permission to submit a dismissal motion by December 2nd. The Manhattan District Attorney who prosecuted Trump is fighting for the sentencing. but has suggested that it could wait until after Trump's second term. Meanwhile, Trump's team has hailed this as a decisive win for him. His communications director has said that the hoax Manhattan case is now fully stayed and sentencing is adjourned. In May, a New York jury found Trump guilty on dozens of counts of falsifying business records. The charges stemmed from Trump's efforts to disguise reimbursements to his personal lawyer, who had made a hush money payment to an adult movie star to silence her claims of a sexual encounter with Trump. Trump has long denied any wrongdoing and cast the case as politically motivated. Alongside the hush money case, Trump faces two active federal cases, one related to his effort to overturn the 2020 election and the other over classified documents he allegedly mishandled after leaving the office. Special counsel Jack Smith has delayed the election interference case indefinitely, but not yet dropped it outright. And a Trump-appointed federal judge has already thrown out the classified documents case, but Smith had sought to appeal that decision as well. As the president, Trump would be able to intervene to end those cases for himself. And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tarani has sent us this report from New York. Take a look.
In a major twist to Donald Trump's legal battle, the New York hush money case has been postponed indefinitely. Now, Trump faces 34 felony charges of falsifying business records and an alleged hush money payment during the 2016 campaign. That was originally set for sentencing soon. However, Judge Juan Merchan has delayed the proceedings as motions from Trump's legal team are reviewed. They argue that moving forward now could ultimately disrupt his ability to transition back into public office. Now, this delay really reflects the unprecedented legal challenges of prosecuting a former president who remains politically active. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
There's exactly a week to go for landmark parliamentary elections in Ireland. Voting to elect the lower house of parliament is to be held on the 29th of November. And for the first time, it looks like that there are clear signals that immigration is a frontline issue. Ireland remains one of the few EU member countries without any large established far-right party, but there is a prominent and emerging group of ultra-nationalist lawmakers in the run-up to the elections. Well, these are leaders who did well in the local polls and now aim to get a foothold in Parliament.
Because housing is the biggest problem, but it's fed by migration. And if you continue to import people who are not going to work and people who are just going to sit around on welfare, using up accommodation that should be available to Irish nationals, then, you know, you're just creating a bigger problem. The first thing you do is you close the borders and you stop any more migrants coming in.
After the 2023 race riots in Dublin and tensions around Ireland's overwhelmed refugee system, immigration has emerged as a key issue. There has been a major rise in mobilization of far-right and ultra-nationalist mindsets. Voices have been raised against immigration, blocking jobs and limiting services filtering down. Polls say that for the first time, immigration is a major issue in the upcoming elections. Almost 150,000 people immigrated into Ireland in the last 12 months. According to CSO figures, this is a 7-year high. The growing population of immigrants means that the two main issues, housing and healthcare, are distinctly impacted. There's a strong undercurrent over whether immigration numbers are too high or not.
The immigration system is just a little bit lax. It's a little bit too relaxed, you know what I mean? Could be a little bit stricter, a little bit firmer on who is coming in to the country. You know, maybe like a bit of a background check or whatever. Like if you're going over to Australia, they want your visas and all that. You've gone to America, you need your J1 working visa. Coming here though, it is quite loose.
On the other side, in the backdrop of a surge in racist crimes as well as demonstrations by anti-immigrant groups, demonstrations against racism have also picked up. Centrist in Ireland's coalition government face their own tensions over the immigration policy. The opposition, Sinn Féin party that saw itself close to power, has a major challenge on its hands from the anti-immigrants lobby. Along with the US bribery charge indictment order, the court documents of an arrest warrant against Gautam Adani were unsealed to disclose them to the international law enforcement officials. Now, an indictment marks the start of legal proceedings and not a declaration of guilt. Following the billionaire industrialist indictment on allegations of fraud and bribery, a warrant for his arrest was unsealed last month in a New York court. The court document states that Judge Robert Levy ordered its unsealing on October 31, 2024. Foreign law enforcement authorities were given access to the unsealed indictment and arrest warrant. The United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York then filed a motion to have the warrant unsealed. So what is an indictment, first of all? An indictment marks the start of legal proceedings and not a declaration of guilt, like I mentioned before. A grand jury is formally charges someone with a crime by issuing an indictment. This does not prove guilt, but it shows sufficient evidence exists to press charges. A grand jury heard the prosecution's case and reached a verdict that warranted the filing of charges against Gautam Adani for various violations of US federal law. The indictment contains crucial legal aspects such as the specific offences against Adani, which are laid forth in the detailed charges, summaries of the evidence that supports the charges. Now, what US laws were allegedly broken? Following the filing of an indictment, the prosecutor requests that the court issue an arrest warrant. Arrest warrants are not issued by US courts unless there is a belief that the accused would willingly show up for court. Instead of a warrant, the court may send summons to the defendant if they are considered cooperative. The court may opt to issue summons instead of a warrant if it determines that Adani is complying or is not likely to escape. Adani's legal team could try to get this option negotiated. The accused whereabouts determine the arrest procedure. Things get trickier when the defendant is outside of the US. The US officials then have two options. Number one, they utilize diplomatic channels to commence extradition proceedings, which would need help from the Indian government under the US-India extradition treaty. Or number two, they could request an Interpol red notice, which would notify law enforcement globally. And to avoid any potential leaks, it is a common practice to first seal indictments involving foreign persons like Adani. The United States' ability to prosecute Adani hinges on his extradition. US courts can only hear cases involving crimes committed within the country or against US residents. Both the US and India must recognize the alleged crime as illegal for extradition to proceed. Beyond that, the US needs to provide the Indian government with enough proof. After that, the Indian government would look at the request through the lens of Indian law and the treaty's provisions. Finally, the Indian courts may be asked to hold hearings to assess if the evidence warrants extradition. Following his arrest or voluntary appearance, Adani would be taken through the official court procedure of arraignment, during which the accusations against him are read out and he is asked to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. At trial, if the case goes forward, the prosecution will have the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. For example, if the accusations are political, they are human rights concerns, or there is not enough proof, extradition might be prohibited. In response to the indictment and media reports on the charges, Adani Group denied the allegations and called them baseless in a mandatory stock exchange filing. The statement also said there are no allegations made against the company.